thank you a lot for downloading the app and helping us hit that goal. And if you haven't downloaded the app yet, I would ask you kindly to go to the iPhone Apple Store, or whatever the hell that's called, or the Android Market, Google Play, and just type in 97.3 ESPN and download the app. I hear that the app is very good. It's very functionable. My father uses it a lot. He used to use the old app, which was Radio Pup. That one didn't work as well. This one works a lot better. You can bring it on the treadmill. You can bring it if you're out of the listening area, in the car. You can also use it as virtually it's an extension of our website. It's got all of John McMullen's articles on it. And he joins me now, ironically enough, on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. He appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. Well done. Nice segue.
Thank you. I think there's a game coming up next Sunday, and I talk about the fairy tale nature of Nick Foles, who in 2013 had the fairy tale season. But, John, it didn't have a fairy tale ending. This could be the fairy tale ending to that 2013 season, could it not?
Sure. I mean, think about it. This team has never won a Lombardi trophy. Obviously, they've won NFL championships in the past, the franchise, but you have to go all the way back to 1960. So you're talking about generations of people in this area that have never had a championship football team and a Super Bowl winner. And we talk about it all the time. I mean, to lose what I feel would have been the MVP of this league had he not gotten hurt, to lose him in Week 14 and still persevere and win a Super Bowl, on so many levels, it's just unthinkable.
It is.
And that's where the Eagles are.
It's the story.
They're on the precipice.
Right, and it's the story that in 2013 many people thought that's how it was going to end. This guy has 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He gets him to the playoffs. Chip Kelly was, he was a martyr for the most part. I mean, the guy could walk on water. He could do whatever he wanted, and he had this unbelievable story, and then it gets cut short. And this guy ends up finding his way back to the city that drafts him and, sits on the bench. He's virtually unthought of. Didn't even play in the preseason. And now he's this one game away from giving the city the one thing that it's yearned for in its entire existence. And I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I say, look, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you're great, one of the things you're doing right now is you're thinking about next year. Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas, they're scouting, and they're thinking about contracts. That's what makes you a great organization. The fairy tale ending could have a very interesting twist at the end of all of this if they win on February the 4th.
Well, there's no twist. Carson Wentz is the quarterback of this team, and it's the face of the franchise. Even if they win the Super Bowl, and even if Nick somehow follows up his performance in the NFC Championship game, which was tremendous, and does it again, which would even be more of a storybook for him personally. I think you're right, and that's part of a good organization. As we talk now, I mean, we're talking Super Bowl, and obviously that's what we should be talking about. And the fan base shouldn't even be looking at the off season or next season, but the Senior Bowl's going on right now, so there's sort of two machines, and one is doing work and potential draft choices, obviously free agency, and you have to think ahead. But thinking ahead is how do you either keep this together to make it run for another year? The Eagles, remember, signed Nick Foles to a 5-year deal. It was essentially a glorified 1-year deal plus a team option. So they have him under contract. So the real question is, if he finishes this off, do you keep the band together for next season in case Carson's not ready for Week 1? Which, by the way, I think he will be. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
See, I'm not as nearly clearly. I am not as sure as you are, but that's neither here nor there.
Part would be, do you spin Nick Foles off in a quarterback, obviously driven league, and there's a dearth of them, do you spin him off when his value is highest and try to get, whether it's, dare I say, even a first-round pick? That could be a potential way Howie Roseman goes. But make no bones about it. I don't care if Nick Foles plays as well as he did against the Vikings in the Super Bowl and beats Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Carson Wentz is the quarterback of this team.
No doubt about it. Look, and I said, look, I agree. Like, if he wins the Super Bowl, he's got a real interesting situation. And Howie Roseman, he's not doing his job if he wins the Super Bowl and doesn't make a phone call the next day and say, hey, are you interested in Nick?
Yeah, and I think, we all know, we've seen Howie in his history. He trades more than any executive in the NFL. So I would think that would be the most likely scenario. There are going to be teams that say, wow, this guy's still a starting level quarterback in this league. We need a quarterback. We could do a lot worse than Nick Foles, and I think he will ultimately take advantage of that situation.
John, obviously, Nick is a very big focal point of what's going on right now. He spoke and composed, seemed nervous, normal dude. What kind of vibe did you get around Nick?
Yeah, Nick is that way all the time. And that's the one positive thing you could say about him, even when he was struggling. He's been around long enough. He started enough games to understand the position, understand the responsibilities of it. And one thing you can't do is show sort of any lack of confidence or any trepidation as a starting quarterback in this league. He understands the role. He's always even-keeled. And basically, if you replay his press conference from today, coming off the phenomenal game, versus his press conference coming off the Oakland game, say, where he was played very poorly, other than the questions, you wouldn't notice a difference in his demeanor. He doesn't change. And that kind of speaks to why he's been able to take this baton and continue to move forward.
I find it interesting with Nick, too, is that back in 2013, there was a big contingent of people that wanted Nick to be the guy. Like, he was the guy, right? Sign the guy. He's the guy. He's our guy. It feels like, that Nick was a guy that the fans back then really wanted. And then, for a couple of weeks there, they weren't sure. But he's been a guy that has, I guess, been embraced by the fans big time here. He's a guy that, like you said, he's a real laid-back guy. But the way that he comes off after, the fans have kind of embraced him back again after kind of being not sure. But he comes off as a guy, too, that genuinely wants to do this for the fan base. Like, he gets how important this is for the fans.
Oh, sure. He's very comfortable here, and he likes, he told the story after the NFC Championship game and the fact that Doug Peterson was the only guy who actually came to work him out privately before the draft when the Eagles drafted him. He has a great affinity for Doug Peterson and the Eagles organization for drafting him. And he saw what it was like outside of Philadelphia. And he enjoys playing here. He really does. And he understands how badly the fan base does want a championship. And he does want to bring it home for him. I think most of these players think that same way because they saw that environment against the Vikings, how loud, how rowdy that crowd was, just what kind of home field advantage that was. That's because of the passion of this fan base as a whole, and you don't see that in every city. And Nick has been in at least one city, two cities really, over with one team where you don't have that same kind of passion. And it's look, if you're going to be a football player, obviously it's a good job to be in the NFL, but it's a better job if you go to a city that really, really embraces their team, and this happens to be one of them.
Yeah, no doubt. And by the way, Tehran mentioned that the press box was shaking. Can you verify that?
Yeah, it was after the pick six. And if you've seen some of those videos online, you could hear the Fly Eagles Fly chant all the way in Jersey across the Delaware River. That's how loud they were after that particular play. And as I mentioned on the show yesterday, that play essentially sealed the game. Even though it tied the game, it kind of was like that scene in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom where the guy reaches in and rips out the heart. That's what the Eagles did to the Vikings on that play.
Your opinion on the guys that Howie brought in, specifically Chris Long and Blunt. There's multiple guys who have won Super Bowls on this team, but they're yesterday we talked about how Peterson will listen to guys, and if they went to him and said, hey, this is what we did in New England during these weeks, but how important they have kind of been to making this team believe that they can be in this moment and beat the Patriots. Like having those guys on the team who know the Patriots so well, like their role in making everybody believe that, look, guys, we can do this. This can be done.
Well, I think, Chris Long has said it for a while, and LeGarrette has mentioned it, that this is a team talented enough to go that far. And it means something more from guys who have been that far and understand what it takes.
Yeah. Because when we talk about during the regular season, when a team will pick somebody off the practice squad, we see it a lot with the Eagles and the Redskins, or they'll switch practice squad players, just try to get a little advantage. Hey, what do you know from being over there?
I think that kind of stuff is overrated, because you have to understand, and they say it all the time, and fans get all up in arms. Look, that's what these coaches do. They spend ridiculous amounts of hours breaking down film to look for the slightest tendency. And now you have an extra week of preparation with the bye week leading up to the Super Bowl. There's nothing as good as Chris Long has been this year, as good as LeGarrette has been at times, and impactful as they've been on this team and helped them get to this position. It's not like Chris Long could go to Jim Schwartz and tell him something he doesn't know about what the Patriots do. It's just, that's not how it works.
Right.
But the fact that how they run their locker room, how they do things of that nature from a player standpoint, you can get something out of that. But as far as game planning, these coaches, they know everything about every opponent, and there's not much players can do to help them with that.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, is with us here. Of course, the Eagles getting ready for the New England Patriots here. And, there's a lot going to be discussed and broken down here, but we talked about it last hour, John. I don't know if you saw these stats, but New England scored 487. Philadelphia scored 486. New England gave up 296, and Philadelphia gave up 295. Are these teams?
Yeah, and they're both
simply
are these 15-3.
Right? Are these teams simply that equal?
Well, I think they're very equal, but I think they got there in different ways. Obviously, I don't think they're similar teams. I think they've had similar success, and obviously the Patriots, I think, lean on the best coach quarterback tandem in NFL history, as well they should. And I think the Eagles are a more well-rounded team from top to bottom. We talk about it constantly, what they've overcome. I wrote, we just spent a long time talking about Nick Foles, the backup quarterback, stepping up. I just wrote on 973ESPN.com today about Nigel Bradham. People don't even talk about it. The Eagles lost the quarterback of their offense and the quarterback of their defense. And Nigel Bradham has stepped into that role of Jordan Hicks. And we talk about Jason Peters and Darren Sproles, and people forget Chris Maragos and even Caleb Sturgis. What they've been able to overcome speaks to the depth they have, and I think they're a far deeper team than the New England Patriots. The question becomes, can you overcome the greatest quarterback of all time? And that's a big hurdle.
No doubt. That's right now when you look at it, I tell you, they both give up 28.6, they both give up 18.5. The difference is one team has Brady, the other team doesn't. Now, Foles played on a Brady-like level, but the difference is Brady does it consistently, can Foles. And really, that becomes the key question of the game. Does this game fall into Nick Foles' hands? You could say last week they won the game because of Nick Foles, right? I mean, you can make a case that they won the game because they had Nick Foles playing the way he did.
Yeah, I mean, last week I kind of, and I think the Eagles will do this, and I'll have a better gauge when I get in the locker room tomorrow, and it's open locker room. But I just because I've been around enough NFL teams, whether you win a game like that or you lose a game like that, you kind of throw it out and not worry about it that much as far as film study, because it was sort of an anomaly. And I think you go back to sort of like the Falcons game, and that's more of the formula you're going to have to take to win a game like this. You're probably not going to have two games like that in a row, and probably, leaves town when you're talking about Tom Brady and the Patriots. There's no way they're going to lay an egg like that.
I think, as you mentioned, how we talked about how equal they are and everything, I think the matchups are so intriguing across this game when you start to get a little closer look at it. The Eagles' defense, I have said, John, the last 2 weeks of the playoffs have been the best unit on the field in all of the games. So they really could be the standout outlier in this game.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of that, and we asked Jim Schwartz about it, and I don't think anybody knows. Obviously, this team has been lights out at home defensively. They haven't been as good on the road. This isn't technically a road game. It's not technically a home game. They're not going to have that crowd that we talked about. They're not going to have that passion. Are there going to be a lot of Eagles fans there? Sure. But it's not going to be like Lincoln Financial Field. So can they play at that similar level defensively in that type of environment? Mm-hmm. History says it's probably not going to be that good. But if they can continue to play at a high level, we've seen 7 Super Bowls with Tom Brady. So we know the ones he's lost, and they were both against the New York Giants, and they were both, for one reason, that defensive line, which pressured him, sped him up, got him off his spots before he wanted to throw the football, and they could cover with 7. The Eagles' defense has the potential to do that. Now it comes down to, can they do it?
I think that's the storyline of the game, John, is the teams that beat Brady and the Patriots, they pressure them constantly, and that's the Eagles' strength. And that would be number 1 on the list of keys on as we start, trickling towards that game. Real quick on the NFL, we do know that we mentioned the other day that the coaching jobs are filled. The coordinator stuff starting to trickle in here. Are there any GM stuff going to be opening up, or is Douglas in the Eagles' nest for at least another year?
Yeah, I think he's safe for at least another year. Generally, you might see a surprise coach being fired, but not this late in the process. Are you going to see a GM leaving? So I don't think you have to worry about Joe Douglas leaving until next year. And remember, he never even got that interview in Houston because the Eagles were still playing, and they're still playing now, so they could continue to block him to interview. But they never had any interest in him. I said on the show they were going to hire Brian Gaine. That's who they hired. And sometimes, as you know, as a GM candidate, that they have a guy in mind, but they sort of want to make it look like they have this wide net, so it looks better from a public relations standpoint. I think Joe Douglas was smart enough to understand he wasn't really in the running there. So that's good news for the Eagles.
Yeah, no doubt. Because you know at some point he's going to get snagged, right? I mean, this is one of those things where enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, I mean, if they continue to play at this type of level and they become, obviously you're not going to make the Super Bowl every year, but if you're a consistent contender year after year after year, yeah, ultimately he's going to leave. Yeah. And certainly the Eagles seem set up better than most to do exactly that.
What if the Eagles?
And I'm not talking about Nick Foles.
What if the Eagles gave Douglas, promoted him to GM, and had Howie's got some exclusive title to begin with, which really doesn't even include general manager.
No, he's the executive vice president of football operations. But he is the GM. Yeah, you could give him the title. You could give Joe Douglas the title and still, but generally, and that's why when you talk about the hiring cycle with GMs in this league and how he is the GM, it's always about, do you have control over the final 53? It doesn't matter what the title is. If you're the executive vice president of football operations, if you're the general manager, do you have control over the 53? Sometimes the coach has control over the 53. In this instance, with the Eagles, Howie has that control. He will continue to have that control, but the Eagles could certainly give him the job title of general manager. The only problem is, if somebody comes calling next year and offers that final control over the 53, he can leave, he can take that job. Mm-hmm. So it's really just semantics, and it's more about the actual power than the title.
If I were to give you a decision, one stays, one goes, which of those guys are you keeping?
Keeping Howie, because he's in charge. He built this team. He hired Joe Douglas. He's the guy who's a wizard with contracts, which is a big part of it. And it's not just about finding players. You got to cobble together a roster under the salary cap. All of that comes into it. And I think the point of the fact that he found Joe Douglas, he hired him in the first place, indicates he could find another good football mind, or perhaps has one in the organization right now. Maybe Andy Weil gets promoted. Joe Douglas's right-hand man. Yeah. So, Howie's the executive of the year. Howie's safe.
Oh, I'm not saying that he's obviously not under any fire.
Well,
but
no, I didn't say it. I just meant, I know people want Joe Douglas has done a phenomenal job. He deserves a lot of credit. But those looking to undercut the job Howie has done by trying to say Joe is the reason why, I don't think they understand all the aspects of the general manager's job. And the fact that the salary cap comes into it, fitting guys under the cap. And we all talked about, dating back to the offseason, Mike, the Eagles didn't have a lot of salary cap room compared to everybody else in the league. But there's not one move that Howie wasn't able to make by manipulating the salary cap.
John McMullen, you can vote for him now for your favorite segment of the Sports Bash, and you can do that at 973ESPN.com. Click in the top trending bar, the Sports Bash Awards, and for your favorite segment on the Sports Bash. John, we'll talk tomorrow.
Hey, thanks, Mike.